That really helps, yes.
That better?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I just picked out a few, 3 verses from Hebrews just to start out. Hebrews chapter 2. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. 2:11. Not ashamed. Good start. I wrote down the wrong verse. That's fun. Not ashamed. Yeah. I meant to put 11, and I had 1 down there. I forgot the other 1. Okay, Hebrews chapter 2, verse 11. It says, "For both he that sanctifieth and they who are sanctified are all of one, for which cause he is not ashamed to call them brethren." Verse 12, saying, "I will declare thy name unto my brethren in the midst of the church, while I sing praise unto thee." And Hebrews 2, Boy, I really made a mess of this one. What did I do? I usually have notes by every other one. I forgot to write down the notes, but anyway, you can't say enough about it. I mean, I'd like to read the whole chapter, but I want to get back into this thing about the covenant, about the name Abraham and Israel. So Hebrews chapter 1 and 2 are so important to really understand. They, like the great parable, the master parable of Matthew 18, they take us all the way back and explain Adam fell and partook of blood, and how Christ did the same. And that lines up, but I know what I think I know what I was going to do. Let's see. Oh yeah, chapter 2, verse 3. "How shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord, and was confirmed unto us by them that heard him, God also bearing them witness, both signs and wonders, and with diverse miracles and gifts of the Holy Ghost, according to his own will. For unto the angels hath he put not in subjection the world to come, whereof we speak." Verse 6, "But one in a certain place testified, saying, What is man, that thou art mindful of him, or the Son of Man, that thou visitest him? Thou madest him a little lower than the angels. Thou crownest him with glory and honor, and didst set him over the works of thy hands." In verse 8, "Thou hast put all things in subjection under his feet. For in that he put all in subjection under him, he left nothing that is not put under him. But now we see not yet all things put under him." Then we'll read 9 too. "But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he by the grace of God should taste death for every man." Now, of course, the Universalists will say every man means every man of every family of the earth, the different races of Enosh, but the book's not written to the Enosh. The book's written to the sons of Adam, one race. And that's racist to them, and that's just abominable, and they won't hear it. So that was the purpose of what I started doing when I talked about last time, looking at covenant law. And I thought I'd do a quick review, because there's another part that I didn't read last time and I want to do. But all right, so we started off basically with Matthew 13:52, talking about taking out of our treasures things that are old and new. So we started off with the covenant, Genesis 17:1 through 8. That's when Abraham was 99 years old. God came to him and said, "My covenant's with thee." And he gave him some promises. He told him that he'd be the father of many nations, and that's how Abram's name got changed to Abraham. That's what the name means, father of many nations. And then he said that kings would come out of him. And then he gave the covenant, the terms of the covenant, which is the promise, that Abraham and his seed, which is Israel, they would be heirs to the land of Canaan, and they'd have it for an everlasting possession. And that's why we went to Genesis 22, and that's the story of where God commanded Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, and he faithfully obeyed and bound Isaac and raised the knife, and the angels, the voice of the angel from heaven, said, "Abraham, don't do it." God stopped it. And that's when he swore an oath on the covenant. So we have the covenant being made, then the oath. And then that's why we went to Hebrews 6:13 through 20, which basically starts off with, for when God made, I'm not turning in the Bible there, but for when God made promises to Abraham, and it goes through everything about the immutability of his counsel, but to immutable things, and that's the covenant that he made and the oath he swore on it. And then it says in verse 20, which hope we have as the anchor of our soul. So we pointed out that we're going from old to new because we're showing that the scriptures written after redemption confirm what was written in the ones before redemption. It's all about the contract, the covenant. It didn't change. The book of Hebrews is telling us that we have to have faith and belief in this same covenant. But we've talked over and over again about it. The modern church won't see it. They spiritualize the covenant. And I have a doozy of a thing to see some of these commentaries to read what they say about this. But if we get to that, we'll do it later. But so there was two from the old and one from the new, and then we went to Exodus 3:6 and verses 13 and 14, where God said, when Moses asked him, "What is your name?" the children of Israel will want to know, and he said, "I am that I am." And he said, "Moreover, I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. This is my name forever, and my memorial unto all generations." So you've got 3 verses in Exodus 3. And 3 is another number for God, too. But so we went to Matthew 22, verse 32, where Christ confirmed it himself. So have you not read? God is the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Then we got into this Deuteronomy 7:6. But God said, "I have chosen you, Israel, to be a people above all people of the earth," which so many deny now. There are no chosen people anymore. There are no, they say. So that's why I'm basically doing this, is going through from the start. There was 144 times from the book of Matthew to Revelation that we get the name Abraham and Israel. A total of 144 times. So, anyway... So we looked at Deuteronomy 7:6, and then we went to 1 Peter 2, 1 through 10. And that's what I meant to read, but I think I want to read these 10 verses here. I'll have to turn and find it. 1 Peter 2. We just concentrated on 9 and 10, where it said, "But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, which in time past were not a people." Now I'll pause there. They're going to interpret that to mean, because they don't use the Bible to identify the Gentiles as being the descendants of the 10 tribes. Northern Kingdom, who was divorced, they just assume that means everybody. They never understand it. But what he's talking to is the people who were a people and then were divorced and not a people. Anyway, he said, "But are now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy." So anyway, starting from the beginning, chapter 2 of 1 Peter, verse 1. "Wherefore, laying aside all malice and all guile and hypocrisies and envies and all evil speakings, as newborn babes, desire the sincere milk of the word, that ye may grow thereby." And this is really what we're talking about with the covenant law. It's the foundational milk of the Bible. It's hard for people to hear because we have all these centuries of universalism and the Nicene Creed with no mention of the Abrahamic covenant, and all this in Christendom having been built off the foundation of the holy and everlasting covenant that God made with Abraham and his seed. Anyway, I wanted to read it without interrupting, and I already broke my own rule there, but "that ye may grow thereby, if so be ye have tasted that the Lord is gracious." Verse 4, "To whom coming as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God and precious, yes also as lively stones, are built up a spiritual house, an holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices, acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. Wherefore also it is contained in the Scripture, Behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect precious." That's Christ. That's the rock the church is built on. And he that believeth on him shall not be confounded. Unto you therefore which believe he is precious, but unto them which be disobedient, the stone which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner, and a stone of stumbling, and a rock of offense, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto also they were appointed. And that's what we get to 9 and 10, where, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. And verse 10, which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. So that's when we took the time, just a quick review, and it showed, that if we go back to Isaiah 45, verse 4, it says, Jacob my servant, and Israel my elect. So it's very simple. Israel are the elect. And that's when he used the word chosen generation in the first part of verse 9 of 1 Peter chapter 2. Chosen generation. So you do the study in 1080, it's genos. And it's just chosen race is what it means. It's been the same, hasn't changed. It didn't change from old to new, the purpose of this study. And we did a little more exploration on that, and we went back to Exodus 19, looked up the word peculiar, but there's more. And a good center column reference Bible is going to give you directions to go there. And when you go there, they'll lead you to other verses, and you'll see that apostles aren't teaching anything new here. They're confirming the old. All right, then we went to Psalm 105, read 6 to 12. I won't go back there, but it goes through the covenant from Abraham to Isaac, and then he confirmed it unto Jacob for a law. And that's when we went to Mark 12, where Christ was asked, what's the greatest commandment of all? And the first words out of his mouth is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. So before he answers the question, he forms it on the basis of the covenant law, that he confirms that there's really only one God. Not this three different gods, kind of the God of the Old Testament who's mean and angry, and the God of the New who's nice and, and then he answers the question, says, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. And then to love thy neighbor or love thy brethren is like unto it. So he sums up the first 4 commandments of the 10 commandments with God, man's duty to God, and then the last 6 commandments, man's duty to his fellow man. But it's always about the brethren, and it's always in the context of the covenant. There is no verse that makes the covenant of none effect. There's no verse that overturns it, and there's no verse in the Bible that adds parties or names to the contract or adds any terms and conditions. So we went to Amos 3 just to show, I'm not turning there, but Amos 1 and 2, God said, of all the families of the earth, Israel, only you have I known. Therefore I'll punish you for all your iniquity. Then I went to Ephesians 3:15 for the new part, and that's where Paul brings up the word family. It's the only time it's in the newer scriptures. And Paul says, the whole family, both in heaven and earth, the whole family is named. But that's just old and new. So that's what we're doing on this. We're going to do a few more. And, we're not going to have to do all 144 verses and passages that contain the names Abraham and Isaac. I don't think we'll have to go that far at all. But I wanted to continue with it to finish up a few more. Sorry, I had to get a drink of water. So I'm going to turn to the last book of prophets, the book of Malachi. And we'll see the unchanging God. In Malachi 3, verse 6, God said, For I am the Lord, I change not. Therefore, ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. So there's another covenant reference. And there's many. If you look up the word covenant in the concordance, I think it's said 292 times. And I highlighted some in mine. I do have it open to that now. I just have to move things around here to get it in light. Hold on a second. So you can do little scans of this just to see how many. I mean, you can take a highlighter. Let's see. Oh, there's so many. I mean, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 30 verses in the prophets, in the law. It says, everlasting covenant, Ezekiel 16:60, the everlasting covenant, Ezekiel 37:26, and my covenant will I not break nor alter, Psalm 89:34. He hath remembered his covenant forever, and that's what we did with Psalm 105. He hath commanded his covenant forever, Psalm 111, verse 9. Let's see. Not forget the covenant of thy fathers, Deuteronomy 4:31. Even the covenant of an everlasting, that's Numbers 25. But it's all the way through, because it's never changed from when he started, right? You know, and you can read Genesis 15 through 17 to get more, but the Genesis 17 is where the covenant was actually, it became a written contract. That's a written contract we're reading. People don't realize this. That's, the parties are named in the terms and conditions.
Wait a minute, Keith. Where does it get written?
Genesis 17.
What does it get written on?
Well, Moses was inspired to write it. That's when our Bible began to be written, with Moses.
Thank you very much.
Right. And, oh boy, I've got a lot on my mind about time periods, because I was starting to talk before about this 430 years that's in Galatians chapter 3. And they get their time period all messed up because they think that that's the day that God, when Abraham was 99, that God gave the covenant to Abraham, but it's not. It's actually the last confirmation. See, you can look up the word confirmation, and we just did it right now with Genesis 22, and God confirmed it. And then we confirmed it in the newer scriptures, so it didn't change after redemption, by going to Hebrews 6, 13 to 20. But it was confirmed then unto Isaac. Then it was confirmed unto Jacob for a law. But the time period of 430 years starts when they go to Egypt, because there were some things that had to be done. And I'll get into that a little later, because I want to get into these last few just to finish this part up. But oh, excuse me again. Another drink of water. Boy, this winter, it gets so dry. I don't know. Some days I just have to constantly drink water. I think I might get a humidifier if I can somehow. But all right. So, well, if we let's see, what else should we do? Yeah, I was going to say too. I mean, you can go to the book of James, and it's easier than having to take the extra step of explaining the elect. But I mean, if we just turn back from Peter to James, this is simple. I mean, here's the only epistle that James writes. And verse 1, chapter 1, book of James. A servant of God and of the Lord, 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Greeting. My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. So anyway, that's pretty clear. He's writing to the 12 tribes. Covenant law confirmed. And they're scattered abroad. And this is written before 70 AD. And the so-called diaspora,
Right.
That's the modern church. You say, okay, when was the diaspora? Well, that was 70 AD. And that just, shows that they don't understand any of the history of the Bible. Because 75 to 80%, my best estimate, that's the 10-tribe northern kingdom, were scattered abroad 740 years before Christ was born. And then, more than 100 years after that, came the Babylonian captivity, which there had to have been millions of Jews Yehudi, Israelites of the house of Judah. And, Nebuchadnezzar carried them all away, except a remnant that they left to till the ground of the poor people. But millions went into captivity. Now, about 2.5 generations go by, 70 years, when Cyrus gives the command to go back and rebuild to anyone who wants to. He didn't force anyone to do anything. And you had 42,360 plus their servants, which was 7,337. So you had almost 50,000 people go back. That's the year 536 BC when Cyrus gave that command. And I've got good articles, and I'm going to put up more websites. I'm glad we started posting some things. I should have thought of that a long time ago. But I'm going to put up articles, and some of them are going to have the archaeological evidence to prove these dates and things, and I think it can be a real help. But anyway, so if you have almost 50,000, and their servants were not Edomites. I was going to tell Susan this because the George Gordon series, and it brought up the book by Charles Weissman, who was Esau Edom, and he made the same mistake which you and I covered before. It goes back to Esther chapter 8, and after God delivered his people from the Edomites, from Haman, who was an Agagite, and that those are the descendants of, they're Amalekites, and Amalek was a grandson of Esau, so they're Edomites. He delivered them out of their hand when they were plotting to have them killed, turned the tables on it, and Haman was hung instead of Mordecai. And then it said, many then of the people became Jews, and that's where Charles Weissman made a mistake, because what he assumed that meant is they somehow interracially married with a bunch of Edomites, and it's not really what happened at all. What happened was, just like when they were in the promised land themselves, and strangers of the race of Adam would come in, they would have to be treated as guests, and that's the word stranger when it's ger, G-E-R. It means a guest, a sojourner. And it was lawful, as long as they were of Adam, for Israelites to marry them. And they could enter into the congregation. And their children, if it was an Israelite man marrying a woman of Ham or Japheth, come into the land, their children would be Israel. Now, if it was an Israelite woman, it still wouldn't be unlawful for her to marry a Hamite. And we can turn to examples to show that. But the point is that eventually, this is how God increased his people till they'd be as the number of the dust of the earth and the stars in the sky and the sand of the sea. It's just important to know that when you're in the time period in Moses' time, and that there were lots of Edomites around. There were lots of Hebrews who were not Israel. All we have to do is go to the genealogy in Genesis 11. Read it down. Every single one of these men named comes from Arphaxad, which is son of Shem, and then goes to Eber, where the name Hebrews comes from. And in each of the lineage, it says, and they had other sons and daughters. But they're not named, and there's no time period. So the genealogy in the time period is only associated with the line that takes us to Abraham. So, anyway, let's see here. So I want to do just a few more, just to show that, we don't have to do 144 of these. I mean, they're good to do. You can just take a concordance and go down Abraham and go through Israel and the newer scriptures and read them all if you want to. But here's the Malachi one. So this is the second part. We're starting new now. I haven't done this before, but I'm going to turn... Oh, no, wait. We just did Malachi. That's right. Yeah, I was going to finish that up with Hebrews 13:8. Remember, he says, I'm the Lord God. I change not. Therefore, my servant Jacob is not consumed. Covenant law. So in Hebrews 13, verse 25, same thing, confirmation. Hebrews, boy, that was really, hold on a second, yeah. Oh, I'm reading it wrong because it was out of the light. 13, verse 8, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday and today and forever. He changes not. There's been no change. He made a covenant. He swore an oath on the covenant. And he confirmed it with his blood. And we'll read a few of those in a minute too. But, okay, so in in Malachi 3, too, the name Jacob, I just put down John, Gospel of John, chapter 4. Turn in there now. So this isn't Abraham or Israel, but this is dealing with Jacob. But Jacob is Israel, so it's really more than 144 when we add them together. But in chapter 4, I have verse 5 and 12 written down there, but we can read them all. But it says, yeah, we'll read. It says, in verse 2, well, I'll start at the beginning. When therefore, verse 1, chapter 4, Gospel of John, when therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, verse 2 in parentheses, though Jesus himself baptized not, but his disciples. 3, he left Judea. That shows water baptism is given to men to do. That's not baptism of the Holy Spirit. But he says, he left Judea and departed again into Galilee, and he must needs go through Samaria. 5, then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called, I think it's Sychar. I don't have pronunciations in this one, but near to the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Verse 6. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, Give me to drink. In verse 8. Parentheses again, for his disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. So he's alone with this woman. 9, then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealing with the Samaritans. Verse 10, Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knowest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Then she says this, Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? So this woman's a Samaritan. The Samaritans weren't all Edomites or Canaanites or anything else.
Very good.
Proved that before when we did the study of how the church increased to the multitude, and then they were scattered and they went into Samaria. Acts chapter 8 too. Also, I mean, you see, there were plenty of their own race living there, their own family of Israel. It's just that there was a kind of a battle, between Samaria and Judea, two countries. Mm-hmm. You can't just say that everybody in Samaria was, one of the bad seed, and everybody in Judea, Mm-hmm. No, I just wanted to point that out because now we're talking about Jacob again, and this woman's looking for the living waters, and she's of Jacob. Just wanted to make that point on that one. But anyway, so what that takes us to is the primary thing that makes it simple. That's the written contract we just talked about. And that's where the key is, very important. It's Jeremiah 31. It's also in 33 and 34, but we'll just do 31 today, and then we'll go to Hebrews 8:8 and do it again. And this is for Susan and Lois and Angel. Say they're new and they need the repetition. They're wrestling with whether we can actually believe that Christianity is not a world religion. It's a religion given to one family who became a great race in the earth. That's what it is. So, take another drink of water, Mona. So we've been over this and over this and over this, but it's so important because what I'm going to do is pull up these commentaries after I do this and read just how ridiculous these commentaries are.
Well, I love it every time you go over it, Keith, and that I got that point about the woman by the well better today than I've ever gotten it before. I thought that was a wonderful point.
Oh, well, yeah, it gets hard because, even with names, it's like Uriah the Hittite, and they say, oh, Uriah was a Hittite. No, it's a place name. Uriah was an Israelite. But there were Hittite lands within the land of Canaan. And sometimes, we have, in America, we still have Indian names, right? Counties are named after Indian tribes and everything else.
Right.
And it's no different. They have to use some common sense, which isn't too common, I guess, what they say. But I want to pull this up here. I'm looking for it. First Amendment. Where are you? Oh, yeah, here it is. Okay, I'll pull that up. But, all right, we'll do the covenant. I'm going to read from 31 to 40, the whole thing. Verse 31, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, Verse 32, Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was an husband unto them, saith the Lord, But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. Thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinances of the moon, and of the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Lord of hosts is his name, Verse 36, If those ordinances, that's the sun, moon, and stars, depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. In other words, he said, they're not going to depart. We still see the sun and the moon today, and we are going to until the consummation, I believe. But 37, Thus saith the Lord, If heaven above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth searched out beneath, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they have done, saith the Lord. Verse 38, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that the city shall be built to the Lord from the tower of Hananeel unto the gate of the corner. 39, And the measuring line shall yet go forth over against it upon the hill Gareb, and shall compass about Goath. 40, And the whole valley of the dead bodies and of the ashes, and all the fields under the brook of Kidron, under the corner of the horse gate toward the east, shall be holy unto the Lord. It shall not be plucked up nor thrown down any more forever. So he takes us to the new covenant, which is the blood of Christ. That's the crucifixion, the first coming. Then he gives a couple verses that are going to show the second coming. And when he puts away all sin, comes to judge in righteousness and make war, and he does exactly what he promised from the beginning. He gathers the elect from the four corners of the earth, brings them back to the land of Canaan. And that's where they're going, that's where they're going to dwell safely from then on. Those are the blessed. That's the first resurrection, Revelation chapter 20. Those are the ones who were given that immortal body back that Adam had before he lost it in the fall. So, anyway, this is just the basics. Been over it a lot of times, but it's so important. So that's the treasures from the old, and here's the confirmation after redemption to show it didn't change, and that's Hebrews 8. We'll just read from verse 8. And then I'll go back and read verse 6. But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also is he the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. Verse 7, For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. 8. Now see, it wasn't the covenant God made. There's no fault with God's covenant. The fault was with the people because they couldn't keep the covenant. But God knew that. That was to show us how we're incapable of doing it by our flesh, by our carnal mind. We're going to get a few scriptures on carnal, the natural man, in a minute. But he said, For finding fault with them, verse 8, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant, verse 10, that I will make with the house of Israel after those days. Now notice how he just said that there, because the divided, the house of Israel, the house of Judah, the division, that was removed with the blood of Christ. He made them all one whole people, one whole house of Israel again. So this is where he's giving us new information. The prophets had to write it because they were in the days when it was still divided. Now it's not. So he said, with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord, I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people, and they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. So what we're trying to explain, under the old covenant, God established Levites, right, to be the priests under the people. And they taught the people the law. There were 3 branches of the Levites. And, the Aaronic line, that was the only one who could be the chief priest. And on the Day of Atonement, would go into the Holy of Holies, sprinkle the blood, and make atonement for the sins of his own sins and all the people of Israel. Well, it's not that way anymore. Our high priest came, who's also our king, the Messiah, Jesus Christ, and he internalized the law. He wrote it in our law, in our heart and in our mind. We don't have a Levitical priesthood anymore. But that's why when you go back and you see that it was established forever, that's only the type. Every single man and woman who repents and accepts and receives the true gospel, the kingdom of God and the gospel of our salvation, believes in Jesus Christ with all their heart, understands that he is God and God in the flesh, that he made atonement for the fall of Adam so that we could become sons of God again in the Spirit. That's the spirit of adoption. The real adoption is the redemption of the body, the resurrection at the second coming. That's to the resurrection of the blessed, the first resurrection. There's a second. But what I'm explaining here is this is not talking about we're not supposed to go out and teach. The commandment is that we are supposed to teach. Went primarily through men, and that's what Paul says to Timothy, to teach the men who are apt to teach. See, every man who was learning was supposed to learn and then become a teacher. But we have this trapped, I call it like a putrid, stagnant situation where we get into these churches that are really just like a microcosm of the Roman Catholic Church. You've got one guy, and everybody believes it's supposed to be a pastor, and he can do all wrong and make no errors, and he's going to give a monologue sermon, which disagrees with 1 Corinthians 14 on how to teach. We've got a rotten church system because we don't obey the laws of church government, commandments and the ordinances given to the church under the New Testament. But anyway, continue the last 2 verses of Hebrews chapter 8, 12 and 13. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. In that he saith, a new covenant he hath made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. So no, we're not under the old covenant law like George Gordon was. We practice the Mosaic law here, he says, and his others. He never could quite understand the difference between a commandment and a commandment contained in an ordinance. So I'm planning to do one probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks about some fundamental verses from the newer scriptures about law and look at that a little more closely. But for right now, that's if I added it all up, I don't know, we probably have about 10 or 12 that we took from the old and the new. 10 or 12 out of 144. And not even counting all the other ones, the peripheral ones, because that's just the name Israel, but you have Israelite and Israelitish, and then you have all the other ones that go back to the elect and the sheep, and it's always Israel. That's the